Welcome, everyone. How is everyone feeling on day two, Crowdfunded Summit? Blow up that chat so I don't feel so alone. Day two, let's go. A little sleepy? Yeah, that happens definitely, especially when y'all are attending every session, which is amazing. Um, I know there's a lot of y'all that have been going to every single one and late. Yeah, all different types of time zones. Let's see who's gonna win the prize. I don't know what it is yet. Maybe I should have thought about that before I said this, but who who's in the latest time zone? We got some like 11 p.m. Back is a little mad.
Okay.
5 p.m. All right, so we got some midnights too. All right. I don't know who's actually the latest. Probably everyone's here at midnight. You collectively are gonna get a high five from me. All right. I am stalling a little bit. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties getting Kortney up uh to give their talk. But they will be here soon. So no worries. We're just gonna hang out. Basically, kind of feels like I'm talking to myself, but I'm not because I got the chat here, right? All right, good. I was thinking usually I've been asking people what their, to say what their emotion is through their favorite emoji. I was thinking before this, I was like, what should I ask instead? I was like, I'm not sure. Maybe we can play a guessing game. What is my favorite food? Is it either pizza, burritos, or Caesar salad?
Oh, that is the wrong camera.
What's up, Courtney?
Hi.
How you
I'm a
doing?
floating head. I'm doing my best.
I like
Zoom
the floating
hates
head.
me. It's fine.
It's
Yeah.
all, it's all good. I got people trying to guess my favorite food. Let's see.
Oh,
Let's see if how many people
grilled
got it.
cheese and tomato soup.
As I actually do really like that, but I gave them three choices, which was burrito, pizza, or Caesar salad.
Oh, okay,
Is
that's
that
a
a
good
lot of? What
list.
do you think it is?
Uh, Pizza's got so much versatility, so does a burrito. But I feel like Caesar salad is the sleeper winner.
It is not. It is burrito. It is burrito,
Dang.
partly because of the versatility, for sure. Yeah, San Diego man. That's right. Trevor, what's up? Definitely true. All right, I will stop stalling though. Courtney is here. Um,
Yeah. Just pressing some buttons to make
it's
this
all
all
good. It's all good.
function. I don't know why it's doing this when I turned it off.
No worries.
Uh,
Well, if you
there we go. Sorry. I use Zoom like maybe once a year. I'm very much in a Discord space.
do not worry at all. All good. Yeah, if you actually do you want to try to put the camera on? If not, it's not the biggest deal.
Yeah, let me do that. Let me also apologies.
No need to apologize, really. Everyone's hanging out here. Everyone's
Oh.
having a good time. There we go. Oh, I saw you.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
perfect.
clicked too fast that time. My
Hey,
bad.
nice, nice.
Woo.
All right. Well,
Uh,
welcome officially, and
yeah, yeah.
the crowd is pumped up, right, everyone? That's right. So we will kick this off. I'll give a really quick intro, and then Courtney, you can take it away. All right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So Courtney Terry, very excited. You're here, the community assistant at Finji and community coordinator at Dungeons and Daddies. Be it meeples, cards, controllers, or otherwise, Courtney cares deeply about games. With over a decade of experience, Courtney enjoys the intersection of compassion and excitement that being in a community can bring and strives to amplify those good vibes through their work. When they're not online, Courtney could be found attending a convention, solving a mystery game, or failing at comedy. We might have to see you do some comedy here, you know?
Oh, I don't know.
All right. I will pass the mic over to Courtney.
All right, cool, cool. Hey, hi, hello, and howdy. My name is Courtney. We're gonna be talking about soft skills being the real hard skills. I already said who I am. That's me. Woo! Pronouns they, them. Not too pressed about it though. So what are soft skills? I believe soft skills are something that are essential skill sets for community management. Um, and to go through it, soft skills are based on your habits, your personal traits, your qualities. They're also sometimes called people skills or interpersonal skills. And they're not something that you kind of like can sit in a class and learn. They are something that you learn over time. Folks tend to be really familiar with hard skills because that's stuff that's really easy to quantify. It's marketing, programming, graphic design, stuff that you can kind of track with numbers and quantifiable data. Whereas like soft skills are a little bit more nebulous, a little bit more qualitative. This is not an exhaustive list of soft skills, but these are the ones that I tend to need the most in my day-to-day work. Communications of all kinds. Sometimes we mess this up a little bit, but that's fine. Written, spoken, nonverbal body cues, everything in between. Empathy, which for me really is tied up in conflict resolution and emotional intelligence. This happens a lot when you're talking to your customer base or audience. If they ever have issues, sometimes some are more difficult than others. So being able to navigate and kind of figure out where people are based on what they're not telling you. Adaptability is really tied to flexibility. Can you handle a sudden change? Like how would you respond if another pandemic happened and you were trying to do a Kickstarter? You have to be ready to go with the flow at a moment's notice. Taking feedback from people, and adaptability is tied a lot in a desire to learn. So don't be super resistant. Uh, open mind, open mind. Time management, this is a hard one for everybody. We'll get into that a little further. Um, Folks don't consider self-care a soft skill, but knowing when to walk away and take a break and focus on yourself is so valuable when it comes to community management. Active listening, there's multiple types. You want to be a good listener in order to reciprocate the communications that you're trying to make, because a misunderstanding can happen anywhere in the pipeline. Like with me showing up a little late. It's fine. Creativity. I believe creativity can be learned and harnessed, but we'll get into that a little more later. And then leadership with taking initiative in things. So soft skills in action, just to like kind of talk about like a macro view. Moderation and safety is like a really, really big one for community management, especially if you have communities that operate like 24/7. Communities do not operate from a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. Communities are very much 24/7, especially if you have like a Discord where people can communicate with one another. And a really big soft skill is being able to write rules. So for Finji, um, the rules there are clear enough that anyone who comes by can try and understand them, but open enough that we can be flexible for any sort of situation. Um, you want to be sure that your rules kind of reflect who you are as like a person or your brand. Um, and we can get into specifics for those later if anybody has questions for it. But I'm a big fan of rules that have examples of things to do and not to do. So for Finji, we want to be sure we're an English speaking company. We can only moderate things in English. So please try to keep posts in English, be friendly and welcoming. We're all here because we love Finji games, contribute to conversations. That's cool. We're here for you to be homies. Participate in special interest channels, credit work that's not your own, because we're really big on valuing artists and what they're capable of and being sure that those artists get recognized for what they're doing. Um, Things not to do for our server specifically, you don't want to talk about things that could be like, here's how I broke your game through data mining. You don't want to have people spamming or repeating their post over and over or intentionally disrupting conversations. So once you kind of figure out the vibe of your space, it's easier to do the rules, and it takes a second to establish that with your do's and don'ts. Next thing is about establishing a brand voice. I'm a contractor. I'm also with Dungeons and Daddies. Part of community management is knowing what tone to use when you are working with your community and talking about the stuff that you have. So for Dungeons and Daddies, we have a brand voice for Dungeon Daddies as a whole, Dungeons and Daddies for season 1, 2, and 3. The overall theme for Dungeons and Daddies, it's a rowdy, horny, violent podcast for grown-ups. That is represented in almost every aspect of everything we put out, be it our socials like Twitter, Reddit posts, our Patreon updates, the way we engage with the community. We're goofy, we're kind of like a bunch of silly dads in the server. And then each season has its own branding. So something to keep in mind if you're doing a Kickstarter campaign and you're wanting to make games and you want to make more games down the line, you want to be sure that your brand voice is consistent. It would be a little bizarre to be Dungeons and Daddies, a rowdy, horny, violent podcast for grown-ups, and have that through line for our first 3 seasons, and then season 4 being like, all right, we're keeping it PG. We're not doing anything remotely rowdy. We're just going to be soft, gentle, nothing chaotic, no conflict. That doesn't really go with our overarching theme. And then the things that make each of these different still reflect back to the overarching. So we've got season 1, they play as dads. It's about devotion, being supportive, wise. Season 2, teenagers. They don't know what they're doing. They're angsty. It's messy and it's a little gritty. Season 3, we're dealing with overarching terror, horror, navigating uncomfortable spaces. So say you're wanting to start your board game making career, you can have a variety of different things, but to be able to communicate to your community, you need to understand your own internal brand voice and how that ties back to your rules, but also to the products that you have. And that's something that can get a little messy because you could be like, I like all of the things, right? I want to cover everything. You can cover everything, but it helps if you're able to put them into like different buckets, if that makes sense. Another skill that I think is really important that you can see in action for community management is driving a conversation. Mentioned earlier that you want to have people be able to talk about your projects, but also random things that seem completely unrelated. And you won't know that unless you are active in your own community. So the examples I've got here, a lot of our folks love going to events and conventions. This is from Gen Con 2022. It's really cool to compare what everybody's buying, what they're into, what they're discussing, what they're seeing. The second one is kind of a 2-pronged thing with Finji specifically. We really all got into making bread when the pandemic hit. So we made a lot of bread jokes, but Finji also has a name that gets typoed often of a popular Roblox person, whose community would mistake our Discord as the YouTuber Roblox creator, and they would always come in talking about awkward dough. We wouldn't know these things if we didn't try and engage with the people who wandered into the wrong space. But you don't want to shame them for making a mistake. You want to practice compassion by being like, oh, I understand that this was not where you wanted to be, but we hope you enjoy this space anyways, and they might stick around and be into what you're doing. And there can be a benefit from a misunderstanding, right? So we now welcome those folks. We love to make jokes about bread with them because that's the only part of the Roblox thing that we can all unite and understand. And then Chapel Roan, recognizing when people are making references and quoting a lot of lyrics. If you want to be very effective at communicating with your community, it's nice to know where they're at. So you want to be a little bit plugged in. So those are things that I think are super important because if you're not like looking out and seeing what people are doing, what's happening, mistake or otherwise, you're not going to be able to talk to people in a way that is effective because there's going to be more misunderstandings. So that is one that I am a huge fan of. And then this one here I'll probably linger on the most. Soft skill of delivering bad news. You want to be able to deliver bad news effectively, clearly, succinctly. You want to deliver bad news while honoring privacy and acknowledge wrongdoing. So examples of times where you might have something go wrong. You want to be able to communicate with everybody. Oh, I'm also a fan of delivering the bad news, like where it happened, depending on what the news is. So things that you might need to consider uh, that could go wrong. Delays with your projects. Say you've got a funded project, everybody's expecting the date that you estimated it by. Um, Manufacturer messed everything up, all your samples were bad, and they don't want to work with you anymore. You got to find someone else, and it pushes your release for like a couple of months. Um, you want to be able to effectively communicate that without bringing harm to the other parties, right? You don't want to play a blame game. So this is where it is important to know the most valuable soft skill you could learn at any given time, and that is how to effectively apologize. Um, so when you tell your community, hey, we've got these significant delays, we told you spring 2025, it's looking like spring 2026. Um, you won't open up to your community be saying like, well, sorry, you misinterpreted how our business works, or that's your own fault for taking a risk or something like that. I have witnessed people communicate this way before. Um, that is not the vibe. It is best to say what you are sorry for, why what happened is wrong, to accept responsibility, even if the responsibility was out of your hands. Um, with delays as an example, you could say, uh, we were aware of communications and things that could have gone wrong with this company, but we stuck with them anyways. We take responsibility for not seeking an alternative sooner for a potential problem. Um, you can ask your community how to make amends. I recommend kind of saving that one for the back burner though, because if you ask after saying all of the things you've messed up and they give a lot of recommendations and they're not followed, it's going to create more bad news down the line. So a part of community management is kind of trying to think and be a little clairvoyant to navigate what you think a potential problem could be. So you got to be really careful with your words and make sure your intentionality is clear. You can ask them for forgiveness and you can thank them for bringing a problem to your attention. Thank them for their patience and express gratitude for still being a fan of what you're doing. Other bad news that sometimes happen is like maybe you had a reward that you really liked, turned out it's not going to work for you. You got to drop it. Not being funded. Maybe you hit a stretch goal and then you realized, oh, we weren't ready for this quite yet. We've got to cancel that. It's a good idea to make plans for your stretch goals in advance versus trying to figure them out as you go at the end. Um, Otherwise, it's going to create harder comms, but that part of that is being adaptable and open to change and empathetic to the players' understanding because they don't see everything you see. Um, so knowing how to navigate and apologize and try and be empathetic in that moment really, really helps. But recap for a good apology. What are you sorry for? Why it was wrong? Accept responsibility. Um, Tell them what you're going to do to make amends. Some people like to ask, but I prefer telling what you've planned. Commit to trying to avoid the problem again in the future, accept that you will have problems. Ask for forgiveness and thank them. It's never a nothing could go wrong scenario. It's usually always a matter of when. And then another bad news is say you're working with someone and you discover the artist you've hired is doing AI art. That is something that you can own up to in the moment. It's getting harder to tell that apart because some folks are taking it and then like drawing over it. So being able to vet and then own up for the mistake and the oversight is so valuable for community management because again, it's not a matter of if bad thing will happen, it is when bad thing will happen. So that's something that I like to keep in mind. Um, do, 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 do. So some of the soft skills we talked about, there's ways to develop them and like kind of train them on your own. Communications, you can practice with a business writing course. You can also do a speech class. If anyone finds a speech class on navigating talking to a camera or an acting course, let me know because I'm practicing. It's been a minute. Um, but there's ways to practice, and the best way to do it is to do it consistently. I also am a fan of doing improv and stand-up classes, because I've discovered if I'm working on a project that is humorous, it is easier to make a room feel lots of like sadness. It's easier to bring a room to tears than it is to make them laugh alongside you. It's really easy to make a mistake where it feels like everyone's laughing at you, but to make them laugh with you, I think is a wild talent that anyone could develop if they are willing to put themselves in that vulnerable position, uh to be the goofy silly clown. Um I believe in all of us there's a goof. They just want out. They just want a little free. So that's something that, like, if you're making games and you're like, oh, we're fun, we're all about parties, we're all about good times, this is a party social deduction game, but all of your branding is like shy, reserved, and you're like, oh, anything but cringe, it's gonna make it a lot harder because it doesn't match what it is you're trying to do. Um, so big fan of doing stuff like that. Again, not an exhaustive list, but these are my favorites. For empathy, that one's a little harder to teach, but if you take a moment to pause and reflect about, uh, and be honest with yourself about where a misstep happened, like maybe you responded quickly to, say someone breaking the rules about flame wars in like a Discord server, or maybe somebody got on your Twitter and was like, your company did this to me, you guys suck, you're the worst ever. Instead of responding in kind, maybe take a bit of pause, because if you do, it's okay, it happens. Be like, all right, well, you stink too, block. Um, that can come back. So being honest that maybe that wasn't the vibe, maybe that wasn't the energy you want it to project out is a good first step. Realizing you've made a mistake is tough. It's hard for everyone. Um, Even people that you feel like are the most empathetic struggle with sometimes owning up to a mistake. So good part of community management is going, perhaps we went a little too far in this response, and giving, like, taking a beat, just to kind of collect yourself. But also be curious. I've found, when we have inquiries on something, if someone is approaching with hostility, it's coming from somewhere. So instead of being all like, this person is angry just for the sake of being angry, that's not always 100% true. Being like, well, what seems to be the problem? What seems to have been the thing that frustrated you? Be willing to ask questions, and get some clarification, because you might find in the end that something else was frustrating them and they decided to take it out in your update comments section. By taking a chance to pause, reconsider if there's anything you might have done with your own posts that they're responding to, and allowing yourself to be curious really, really helps. Because I also find with a lot of indie devs, they want to do the community management on their own because they're like, I can log in and make a Twitter account. I can respond to someone on Reddit. I can make a Discord. I can do it all on my own. It is very emotionally taxing. So being able to give yourself your own personal grace to ask people questions back can help a lot. Um, Even if what you got to do is like funnel them into a space where it's not so overwhelming and direct. Um, so thing I like to do is set up like a ticketing system so everyone goes to a specific queue, uh, and I've got all eyes on it with like a moderation team. So it's not just me making all these responses, because sometimes people want to take things out of context. So a really important thing is to just be ready to learn, ask questions, remain calm. Um, Adaptability is still that willingness to learn, and that's more than just being curious for the people that you're talking to one-on-one. Sometimes you gotta keep up with the tools as they come out. Social media changes so rapidly. It is dangerous to put all your eggs in one basket. So I know a lot of folks have kind of pulled away from Twitter as a space, but there was a space for indie game devs called Co-host that is being shut down soon. So they've got to go somewhere else. Um, being able to move to different social media platforms to try and figure out where your community is and just kind of diversifying helps a lot. It is a ton of work. Um, but once you establish where your audience is, it really helps out a lot. Um, so a sillier example, I really like streaming the Nancy Drew games. It's really hard to find Nancy Drew people to connect with on Twitter. Everybody's on Instagram. So if I want to talk Nancy Drew, I go to Instagram. Sometimes your audiences are just showing up in different spaces. So having a willingness to learn, to see where the social media trends are going for what you're doing really, really helps. Um, I try really hard not to just focus on only the one because you never know when they're going to shut the lights off. Another thing that can help you learn and navigate for adaptability is giving yourself a chance to try a new hobby. Um, I know a lot of us probably went through many hobbies during the pandemic and then realized you weren't perfect at it right away and you dropped it. That's okay. We're all guilty of that at some point. But to truly adapt is to allow yourself to be comfortably bad at a thing. And that also overlaps with how I feel about creativity in this space. Be willing to try something that's a little outside your comfort. This can be hosting events on your Discord to get the community engaged, or streaming and trying to find a way to showcase your game. If you're really bad, like with in-person stuff, you can practice by like working a booth or running live demos. A good way to practice that is to just do a class that gets you out there and like practicing a thing that's a little bit new to you, and then tell someone else how you learned it. Like if you want to learn how to demo your game and tell people the rules of your game, but you're like tongue-tied consistently, uh, learn someone else's game, see how they teach it, and then ask them if you can teach it back. Um, that can also help too, because when you're making a game, the rules and the way that you play it is often locked up here that you haven't quite figured out how to tell it to somebody who's never seen your stuff before. Um, so trying out new hobbies, playing other people's things, teaching it back to them can really help you adapt to communicate more effectively. Um, or even playing cooperative games and activities in a role that you're not used to. So if you're in like a tabletop RPG group and you play every week and you are always a rogue, maybe the next time you go in, you play as a cleric and you try and take on a different role in that space. That can give you some skill sets on how to navigate a different thing, um, which is something I highly recommend because communities are ever changing. Sometimes your community can be one energy in the morning and be very different after 6 p.m. um, Another part to develop your soft skills, for time management, I'm a big fan of breaking tasks down into specifics. It's not just check my inbox. Because I have multiple contracts going at any time, it's like, all right, I'm going to dedicate half an hour to look at my inbox for Finji. All right, cool, that's done. Next half hour, I'm going to spend that looking at what's going on with Dungeons and Daddies. And then from there, I make like additional lists. So you want to do the same with managing your own Kickstarter or something similar, because that is round the clock work. But we do not function round the clock, right? We need times to sleep. We need time to eat food. We need time to be in the sun. So I'm a big fan of delegating that time, giving yourself little deadlines here and there, and celebrating your small successes versus having a bunch of multitask. A thing that really helps me with time management is the Pomodoro method. I've got this fun little rainbow clock here that I can use to segment out my time. And when I see that finish, I'm like, okay, it's time for a break. The rainbow's disappeared. I'm gonna relax for a little bit. Because that can make you more effective at getting work done. Another thing I use is there's this software on Steam called Spirit City Lo-Fi Sessions. Because a community is not 24, like not a 9 to 5, but is a 24/7 space, sometimes I use software like that to give myself 15 to 35 minutes of focus. Little timer goes off. I take a 5 minute, don't look at the screen for a minute, and then I come back. Uh, that's tied to self-care as well as time management. And I think those are really effective ways to be a healthy community manager, because you want to be sure that you are functioning well before doing something in your spaces because you're cranky and tired yourself. So to be the most effective community manager, to have a successful Kickstarter, you need to find the thing that is your stress relief activity that you can take a break with, and take your mind off things. Because sometimes it can be really hard to be in a community, especially when you've had bad news or something global is happening and folks want to bring a lot of their stuff to your space. Um, and if you allow yourself to be open and available, sometimes people want to put all of that in your personal inbox. So I myself have multiple Discord accounts so that I can log in for my work, and then not be on my phone going, all right, it's 11:30 p.m. I can't fall asleep. Let me just do work on my phone in the middle of the night when I'm not effective at like communicating or thinking straight because I'm exhausted. So I'm a fan of having a bit of separation for that if you can. You also want to be sure that you're mindful with your stress relief and self-care, because if you're too overindulgent, it will lead to neglect of that space. Sometimes you want to do time management on the things you enjoy. Like if I'm going to take a break, I'm only going to do it for like 20 minutes and then get back to it. But that is something that I've noticed as a community manager has helped me a lot, is being able to put up a little bit of that buffer so that I can actually honor my boundaries to get the work done. And like I said, with a Kickstarter campaign, that feels like it's round the clock, but at some point you do need to disconnect briefly so that you continue to do the good that you want to do with the work that you're accomplishing. Um, Another soft skill is active listening. There's multiple types of active listening. Um, so let's see, yeah, I wrote it. Empathic, which is when you're listening to care, to show that you want the other person to know that they're heard. Then there is listening to appreciate. That's like when you're listening to music, or concert or play. Comprehensive is kind of like this setting where you're listening to learn something new. It's like podcast, educational courses, the news. And then active listening, when you're critical listening, is when you're listening for a response. Um, these tend to come into play for every aspect of communications you'll be interfacing with other people. I will say be wary of the critical active listening, because if you are listening to formulate your opinion and ask your question right away, you might miss the answer you were seeking. But these are all sorts of listening skills you're going to need when you are interfacing with the folks that you're trying to pitch your games to, be it like a manufacturer, an artist, publisher, or your fan base. You want to be able to like tell them what your stuff is. You want to listen to them back. You want to make sure that there's a balance and that there's an understanding that sometimes you're going to want to do different types of activities for your community to consume. Like maybe you've got a story for why you're doing what you're doing. This is something that a TTRPG you're making with your daughter because you want to show that you want to do the family bond thing. So you can do empathic presentations, and they will listen empathically. So usually you're projecting that sort of communication style and they are listening back in turn, if that makes sense. Um, Ways to develop your creativity is I like to find joy in something that is typical or ordinary. So might not seem like it applies to the work that I do, but being able to appreciate like a design of a architecture for a building can help when fans come in and they're like, I love the designs of your landscapes. You're like, you can relate to them by being all like, I love the way these landscapes look too. With Finji, we've got a lot of plushies for our characters, and some people may not look at a plushie and think this is a piece of art, but being able to appreciate those things as art helps when you communicate with your fans who are super dedicated for it. Um, Another thing is to enjoy more art. So if you're trying to be creative and like really funny copy, or if you want to try and write something that's a little moody for like a scarier game, uh, enjoying more of that stuff can kind of get you thinking about different ways to approach it, right? So for Dungeons and Daddies, a lot of the copy I write is centered on dad jokes and goofs. So I tend to consume more content that's silly, or is like about family relationships, like Umbrella Academy, and like quoting the characters who say something really outlandish about their father, but it's kind of funny. Um, and so finding inspiration and enjoying stuff that's like that really helps me when it comes to making a goof. Especially when they're so referential for that particular show. Um, with Finji, with the plushies, I also am a big fan of toys and plushes. So being able to connect with our fans and find joy in what other people might see as like ordinary really helps with that community bonding because then there's some familiarity there. Um, Simple ways to practice leadership is being willing to get your hands dirty and try the thing out. By trying it and doing it yourself, you are being a leader versus a manager who usually just delegates tasks. So being willing to jump in and try out the thing yourself so that you can understand the scope of it will help you better understand how you need to navigate. Having some self-awareness about that too. A good leader, I think, is somebody who can say, you know what, this is more than we can handle. Let's reframe, step back, um, stew on this a little bit, figure out what we want to do before pressing forward. Um, and I know it sounds silly, but if you have an indecisive like friend group or partner or whatever, choosing where to go out to eat or what to do is a good way to practice being a leader because you're taking initiative in doing a thing. Because sometimes that's what you have to do in a community space. Uh, if there's something going on and you need to respond to it, you need to be able to take that initiative to give folks the answers that they're seeking. Um, but yeah, that's me. Again, this was a very macro view of mostly soft skills and how I navigate them, and that you can probably find them more in spaces that you're not expecting them to. And they're lifelong learned things. So yeah, hope that was helpful. Sorry, I was a little
Oh,
rambly.
you're not. You're not. I don't know if you saw the chat, but the chat was engaged the entire time.
Oh, well,
So
thanks.
let's give Courtney some love in the chat as well, and we'll go into Q&A. Yeah, not rambling. Awesome. Got a heart. It claps.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone, we'll go into the Q&A. There's already a few questions in there, but if y'all want to take some time and put in some questions, we'll take the next or whatever time we have remaining to go through them.
Cool.
And I'll just kick it off with the first one. Uh, why is using AI art bad? I've been told if not using it, it is not wise these days. It is not wise these days to use it.
So the issue folks tend to have with AI art is that it is taking and remixing creations by other people without their consent or permission. Um, so that's why it tends to be frowned upon because it's not coming from that human perspective. So that's why I put it under like something that you could deliver as bad news. Some people use it as placeholders. Some artists use it for like traceovers. But you have to be upfront about that because the basis is coming from the hard work of other people and it being remixed, them not getting compensation or recognition for it. So that tends to be why we stay away from it in what I do. Um,
On the subject of apologizing for delays/other disappointments, do you recommend communicating quickly to inform your backers early and show transparency, or to wait until you have enough info about what you are doing to fix a situation to soften the blow?
Yeah. So sometimes it depends on the reason for the delays or the aspects for it. If you woke up 9 a.m. and you saw in your email 40 minutes ago, hey guys, we're dropping your stuff. There's a delay. Cope. Give yourself at least a day to deal with your feelings because it's going to upset you too. Um, so I'm of the persuasion that you give yourself one sleep if it's real big, stressful news, because that is actually something that happened with Dungeons and Daddies. Our first merch provider for our store went bankrupt and disappeared on everyone during Christmas break.
Oof.
I found out because I was being nosy on Discord. I was like, hey guys, you got any updates on our Black Friday sales? And everyone messaged me within a couple of hours saying they couldn't log in. So
Oof.
we spent a couple of days trying to figure out what happened. Actually, one of the dads in our cast, Freddie, flew out to our manufacturer and our warehouse going, "What's wrong?" And the whole company was shut down. So this impacted multiple people. We were like the ones who broke the news first. Um, so that was a nightmare scenario that we worked on as a team and we relayed back to our community over the course of like 3 or 4 days because it was a huge deal. Um, so like depending on the severity of it, most folks won't know who your manufacturers are or the reasons for your delays. So if you want to take a beat, process your own feelings, allow yourself to be just as enraged as everyone else, then respond. That is how I try and soften the blow. Be honest, but also don't spend the whole time blaming them. Recognize that a lot of people are getting hurt in this scenario. Because in this case, like a lot of people lost jobs. We didn't want to be all like, boo, shame on you. This sucks for everyone. So owning up to that, I think really, really, really helps.
What was the biggest mistake? What was your biggest mistake in community management?
uh Committing too much time too fast. um I took me a long time to recognize that communities are 24/7, but our jobs are not, and it is okay and not selfish to take care of myself. And a lot of other community managers I've noticed have done the same. Or people who think they don't need a community manager or don't need a dedicated role for that. Um, that is that is the biggest, toughest realization. But once you're able to navigate that and let folks know and like assert a boundary, it makes your community like healthier. But it takes some accidental late nights to do that first.
Yeah,
Responding to a message at 2 a.m. and then going, I shouldn't have done that.
yeah, I feel you on that. I was like gonna go to bed. I got an email last night. Even it was like someone asking a question. I'm like, I want to answer it, and I started going. I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna answer this. I'm gonna put that down. Go to
Yep.
sleep.
Yep. I've had to message because I have like the multiple Discord accounts. I will message my main and I'm like, I'll deal with it later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
These are my thoughts in this moment and I'll come back later.
Yeah, put it over there. Go with tomorrow, later. All right. Do you have podcast suggestions for soft skills, particularly communication tactics?
So while I work for a podcast, I don't listen to too many. But when it comes to communication tactics, my biggest thing is throwing myself out there. I have a lot of folks in my life tell me I'm very outgoing and extroverted, but truly, when we're done here, I'm probably gonna go in my room, turn the lights off, and close my eyes for an hour because I was so nervous. Um, so my way of developing the communication skills is allow myself to make mistakes and put myself in scenarios where people want to talk to one another and engage. Um, it's harder to practice if you are mostly listening. It has to be something that you are more doing. So if you work a job where you're interfacing with a lot of people, um, and you're not going to see them ever again, like they're largely strangers, and you work at like a Panda Express, put on a persona that day and practice communicating a little bit differently. Um, that is what I did as a teenager to get over my anxiety. So I know that sounds bonkers, but that is what's helped me with communication is role-playing games and being a little silly with it.
At what point do you need to block someone on Discord or Twitter? If at all possible, we try to work through someone's frustration, but when is it time to cut that off?
Yeah, so at that point, you want to decide what their value is to you in the community and also recognize what your rules are that you have in place. Um, so if somebody's just how do I say this? If somebody's towing the line and they're not quite doing something that feels like a bannable offense, like spamming links to Discord servers for cryptocurrency, if they're just being like a little overzealous, I'm a fan of timing them out in increments and letting them know they have strikes. You can be a little intense and overzealous one time. You just get a warning, either in the chat or privately. I let you know. Two more times, that's when you're going to be removed. That's what I usually do because I want to give people some grace to be a little weird, but having rules that you actually hold is super important. That's another actually mistake of community managers. Having your rules in a space and then letting somebody get by because they're active. Or like on Twitch chats, like this person's giving me a bunch of money over the years. I can't ban them. It's healthier if you do, if they're causing issues. So I function on a three strike system. Um, First is a warning, second is a timeout or a mute for like 5 days, third is permanent. So that's how I tend to navigate it. Their $10 won't mean anything to you if they're going to scare away other people.
Right. Right. How do you document your company voicing so that everyone on your team is on the same page?
So the way I do it is probably a little zany. Because I've got the different email accounts. I have uh everything I have is like color coded, and then I can look at it and recognize what mindset I'm supposed to be in when I'm writing in that space. So I've got all these Google Chrome profiles. And that just reminds me because I associate colors with feelings very strongly, or like with Dungeons and Daddies, our branding has a lot of orange and a lot of red. So when I see that, I'm like, all right, we got to remember we're in this space. And so I allow myself to just kind of like only look at that and have it in mind. That's how I kind of track company voice when I'm doing it live in real time. Another thing though is if you want to put that in like a Notion and put like keywords and figure out vibes, you could practice branding with role-playing characters that you do. Um, so like you could have you want to navigate like a Finji, for example, is based on like the wonderful, the strange, and the brilliant. You can approach wonder in different ways and put that in a role-playing character. And that's a good way to practice like branding. Um, but yeah, I color code everything in my personal life.
I love it. Andrea likes that as well, I think, in chat. All right.
Yeah.
How many people in Discord do you think you need to start having a dedicated community manager?
I would say the moment reading all the channels is overwhelming for you. Because it can be very different. You could have 30,000 people who don't post a whole lot and are mostly there to read announcements, or you could have 1,000 people who talk nonstop. Um, so I'm of the persuasion of when logging into your own Discord starts to stress you out, you might need to look for additional help. Um, and then you could always do it on a contract base because it could be it dies down in like 5 months. That's fine. But yeah, the moment you open it and you're just like, what do you mean? There's 700 missed chats in general. Um, I've had that happen a couple of times. Sometimes people are very enthusiastic one night.
Yeah. So when someone wants to go find a community manager like yourself, uh, where where do they find them?
I've noticed a lot of people who do community management are often like outstanding moderators in a community, or people who are really good at like being self-sufficient on like Twitch chats. I've met folks who are like, I need a community manager who knows my thing, and I'm like, well, I'm at capacity. Is there anyone that you shared your game with that you're really into that's like a super fan? Do they stream? What if you talk to them about it and they've been able to try and navigate it that way? Um, like I myself started off as a moderator for Giant Bomb, which kind of got my foot in the door for a bunch of board game stuff. Because I was so active at Giant Bomb and understood forums and communicating with people that way, it was real beneficial to me. So I've been doing this for 15 years, and that's my recommendation is occupy those spaces, and sometimes you can find them within. Your biggest fans will usually be your best first community manager. Um,
All right. And then speaking of moderators, how do you handle overzealous moderators?
so I like to give my mods a moderator guideline and be like, hey, you have to obey the rules too. You're being held to another standard. And if we're giving them an additional standard and we're requiring a lot of them, I also like to offer them compensation in like copies of the games or whatever, like a free merch thing here and there, depending. But it helps because the more overzealous ones, you'll tell that they're also only in it for like proximity to the creators. They want clout, they want free stuff. Uh, when you hold them to a moderator guideline, um, they have their own code of conduct that you can internally track and check. Another thing I'm a big fan of is anonymous reports forms. So if a moderator is being super awful, another moderator can be like, hey, I think they overstepped here. It made me uncomfortable. They don't attach their name to it, and you can investigate that way, and then you just remove them. Um, so that is what I do. I give the moderators their own kind of guidelines and let them know that that is what they're supposed to follow for us.
All right. Well, we actually got to the end of the questions list, which I feel like is a first. We don't typically do that. Is any final questions? If not, we can take a little bit of a break before we go to the next session. I know some of y'all were asking for that in chat, especially the ones that have been here for 2 days, going to every single one. So do a quick little recap or wrap up. But actually, while I'm pulling it up, everyone give some thanks to Kortney for sharing her time and expertise and answering all your questions. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
taking the time to do that. I know everyone does as well. Look in the chat.
Yeah. Also, if
Um,
you are wanting to launch your thing and you don't have a Discord yet, you can do it now. It takes a while to learn the permissions and finding a bot that you like. It takes longer than you think.
start now. Yeah. Starting earlier is better than later. And I know you all have heard this a million times. I'm going to say it again. Please fill out the survey for this. We do read every single one that comes through. We read all your feedback. And to sweeten the pot a little bit, you'll be entered to win Amazon gift card coming up here in our closing ceremony if you do more than 3. So we'll put that in the chat if there's someone from my team that can do that, or I can do it right after this. There it is. Thank you. And then coming up next in 7 minutes, help. I need art for my game. Maria is going to be giving this awesome talk. So everyone go take a break, get some water, and then gear up for one of these final talks. And then, yeah, Kortney just put that in chat as well if you want to go follow her on most platforms. All right. Thank you, Kortney. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.